Well, let me first introduce Margaret Barker, who probably doesn't need great introduction since many of you are here having read things that she has published. She's certainly developed an important new approach to biblical studies, now known as temple theology. She's had close connections with LDS temple studies and with our programs here for temple studies in Utah. She read theology at Cambridge University and then went on to pursue her academic interests as an independent scholar, but also as a Methodist minister and a trainer for those going into the circuit preaching within the Methodist, what's it called, Margaret? A stake? Probably not.
No, certainly not. Connection is our word. Connection.
But within the circuit, there in the Methodist congregations where she lives in near Derby, England. She was elected president of the Society for the Study of for Old Testament Studies in 1998, and so far has written 17 books with more on the way. One of the interesting things about her scholarship is that the books build sequentially, one after another. So be sure to read all of the previous ones before you pick up number 18. This work has led her especially to be interested in interfaith studies involving the environment. She's been on a very important international symposium that's been running since 1967, over 20 years, on religion, science, and the environment. In 2008, she was awarded a Doctor of Divinity degree by the Archbishop of Canterbury in special recognition for her significant contributions, particularly regarding the New Testament. She's a mother and grandmother and a wonderful wife. And she was involved for over 30 years in a lot of humanitarian service to women in need of shelter. Personally, Margaret is wonderful, engaging, open to all kinds of insightful new ideas, and always brimming with what's up with the latest. And Margaret, we look forward to hearing your overview and your presentation on theology and the environment. Her title is Creation Theology in the Bible.
First, I must begin with an apology. My throat does not like the dry air of Utah. So I have to go around with a water bottle. I am sorry about that, but it is a necessity. The Bible has a beautiful and sophisticated account of the creation and the role of human beings. But this is not set out in a single text. Both in the biblical stories of creation and in the design of the Jerusalem temple, there is a single vision of the relationship between time and eternity, between God and creation, and between the visible world and the invisible world of God and the angels. To understand what the Bible says about the creation, we too must glimpse the vision that informed the worship of the temple, the poetry of the Hebrew prophets, the sayings of the sages, and the images of the storytellers. All express and honor the same truth about the creation. Since the New Testament shares this view of the creation, this is the basis of Christian belief about the environment. And I'll give you 6 pictures. First, the temple in Jerusalem represented the creation. The Genesis story of the 6 days of creation also described the ceremonial building of the tabernacle described in Exodus 40. Each stage in the building of the temple corresponded to one of the days of the creation. The later temple was a larger version of the tabernacle built in stone. It was in two parts, divided by the great curtain which represented matter. This was woven from 4 colors to represent the 4 elements. White represented the earth, blue, the air, red, the fire, and purple, the water. The outer area of the temple represented the visible material world. The inner part was the Holy of Holies, the invisible world of the glory of God and the angels. The curtain represented matter concealing the glory of God from human eyes. But the Holy of Holies in the heart of the temple showed that God was at the heart of the creation. All temple worship concerned the relationship of the creation to God, praise, thanksgiving, asking for forgiveness. And the whole of the visible world was thought to be a temple where human beings were the priests. Adam, that name simply means a human being, was put into Eden to serve it and to preserve it. These were 2 Hebrew words which also meant to lead the worship in the temple and to preserve the teachings. Adam was the first high priest, showing that the role of the human being was to lead the praises of creation offered to the Creator. Adam is often described nowadays as the steward of creation, but that is not a biblical image. It's a very Protestant business image. Adam was the high priest. After 6 days, God rested on the 7th, the Sabbath, showing that when the creation was complete and very good, nothing more was made. The goal of creation was not more and more, but sufficiency, completion, and rest. We can see from John's Gospel, when Jesus healed the man at the pool of Bethsaida, that he was working with his Father on the 6th day towards the state when everything would be very good. Creation was not yet completed, and Jesus was engaged with his Father on that task. This is John chapter 5. The second picture, the whole creation, heaven and earth, was bound together in a network of bonds known as the eternal covenant, where eternal means the timeless but constant presence of God, and the eternal covenant joined all things to this timeless state. This was the covenant that God made with Noah, and its sign was the rainbow. It was also known as the covenant of peace, where peace translates the Hebrew word shalom, and that means more than just peace. It means wholeness, integrity, everything as God intended it to be. The covenant of peace describes this state. In the time of Jesus, it was also called the covenant of steadfast love. This is a Hebrew word that's very difficult to translate. It's the word chesed. The prophet Hosea showed that this covenant was first given to Adam, but he broke it, and his people had done the same ever since. And then quoting from Hosea chapter 6, I desire love and the knowledge of God. But like Adam, they transgressed the covenant. For Adam, the result of losing this relationship, the result was losing his relationship with the fruitful land. Cursed is the soil because of you. Jesus said that keeping this covenant was the sign of being his disciple. John chapter 13, by this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. Everything, the visible natural world, human society, and the invisible world of the angels was part of this one system created by God. The bonds of chesed, loving kindness, held everything together and joined the visible world to God at its center. Any action which broke the bonds was called sin, and so human conduct could and did destroy the system. Sin could be deliberate or through ignorance. The effect was the same. One of the key roles of the priests and of the angels was to teach about right conduct. Breaking away from God was not seen as liberation, but as deprivation, losing touch with the source of life and renewal. The Jewish mystics described the Holy of Holies, or whatever was within that, as the mystery of existence, the mystery of becoming, how all things came to be. And a Christian gospel not in the New Testament, the Gospel of Philip, said that the veil of the temple concealed how God controlled the creation. When the bonds of the covenant were broken, the whole system collapsed. The vivid pictures in the apocalypses warned what would happen as the result of human sin. Stars would fall from the sky, the sun would lose its light. You know those pictures. The prophet Jeremiah used less colorful language, but spoke clearly of the same situation. When people are skilled in doing evil, he warned, when they are stupid and do not know God, then the earth will return to chaos, the state before God created order. It would once again be waste and void, the traditional words at the beginning of the story of creation in Genesis. The broken covenant was repaired by atonement, when the temple and the creation it represented was purified from the effects of sin, interestingly described as pollution, and was recreated. Atonement involved repentance and self-sacrifice to renew and restore everything that had been damaged, not only the person's relationship to God, but also the whole creation. Ancient poems say that when the Lord comes on the day of judgment, he will restore or heal the soil of his people. Deuteronomy 32. The third picture is the Holy of Holies, the invisible presence. And this is a unity because God is one. This unity underlies and binds together in one system everything in the visible creation. The prophets glimpsed this in their visions, and the sages warned that when the people lost sight of it, everything disintegrated. Proverbs 29:18, translated literally, where there is no vision, the people unravel. People on earth were able to learn something about God from the angels, whose name simply means messengers. They were themselves part of the glory and the unity of God. The song of the angels symbolized the harmony of all creation centered on God. And when people on earth praised the Creator, they joined with the angels in their music and became part of the great pattern of creation. The harmony and shalom of creation were maintained by the obedience of the angels, and humans had to be obedient to God if they were to preserve the creation. The Christians knew that they were angels, saints here on earth, and they called themselves the Holy Ones. The fourth picture, the pattern of creation is determined by God. The pattern is described as the statutes, literally the engraved things. When earth is in harmony with these divine statutes, the natural world and human society enjoy justice and righteousness, words describing that state of peace, of shalom. When the prophet Isaiah depicted this state when the covenant was restored, this is what he wrote. The Spirit is poured upon us from on high. Then justice will dwell in the wilderness, righteousness abide in the fruitful field, and the effect of righteousness will be peace. Isaiah 33. The exact measurements, proportions, and roles of everything are planned by God, and these are known as the mysteries of creation. They are not simply cosmic dimensions, but even include fair dealing in weights and measures. Progress is not a part of the picture. The aim is to keep everything in harmony with the plan of the ruler of creation. And so we say in the Lord's Prayer, "Thy kingdom come," which means, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Fifth picture. Humans were created as the image of God on earth. And so there was no statue in the temple in Jerusalem. People worshipped God by their treatment of other human beings and by their care for the creation. Jesus taught in his parable of the sheep and the goats, "If you did it for one of the least of these, you did it for me." Humans as the image also meant that people had to care for creation in the way that God cares for creation. Genesis says that Adam was created from the dust, but began his real life when God breathed into him. He was put in the Garden of Eden to serve God and to serve the garden. He was forbidden to take from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, secular knowledge. All the other trees, including the tree of life, were permitted. The tree of life was the tree of wisdom, and this had been planned as Adam's food. But Satan, described as the deceiver because he made forbidden knowledge look attractive, persuaded Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, and they discovered the consequences of secular knowledge, materialism and reductionism. They became no more than the dust from which they had been made, and they could not live in the presence of God. They left the Garden of Eden. The sixth picture. The tree of life was the symbol of wisdom, that God-given knowledge which binds all creation in harmony to the Creator. Some angels, known in the stories as the sons of God, rebelled against God and brought their heavenly knowledge to earth, but without the law of God. They corrupted creation by teaching secular knowledge which fragmented and destroyed. Theirs was a deceptive, false covenant, offering a freedom that led only to death and decay. St. Paul, in Romans chapter 8, taught that Christians were the new sons of God who were to free creation from these bonds of decay and restore this covenant of shalom. And in the book of Revelation, St. John learned that the faithful Christians would again eat from the tree of life and be restored to Eden. And then a seventh point, which is not really an image. There is only one God, and to worship anything else is idolatry. An idol is anything man-made, not just a statue. It can be an economic or a political system. Today, the market or the state is all too often worshipped as a god. Idolatry gives a false center to the creation, which warps and distorts the whole system. The second of the Ten Commandments warns that idolatry results in iniquity, and this Hebrew word is actually, it implies distortion. Idolatry results in iniquity, which affects several generations. And so the gist of the second commandment is, the Lord brings the distortions of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. In his great vision of the day of judgment in the middle of the book of Revelation, St. John heard heavenly voices proclaiming the kingdom on earth. the time for destroying the destroyers of the earth. This aspect of the kingdom is too often neglected. And then St. John saw the archangel Michael and his angels fighting against Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. Now, the battle against those who destroy the earth is a battle against those who deceive with false knowledge. And that battle, I suggest, is raging around us now. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That is certainly a wonderful outline for us to begin with as we think about how the world was created and why, and what we can do to preserve the creation as it was intended to be. Let me ask George, David, Jacob, if you have any question you'd like to, or comment you'd like to add at this point. I know, George, you've been with Margaret for the last couple days up in Logan. What question do you wish people would have asked in Logan after Margaret finished her paper?
Well, there was a question asked that I wouldn't mind asking again, actually, because I think it's such a rich topic, and there was some follow-up conversation about it. But the distinction between stewardship, Adam as a steward and Adam as a high priest, I think, and I think you even implied that could take all day to explain.
Yes, I think it would.
But I think that's a very interesting distinction that I think we would all like to hear a little bit more about.
Well, I feel unhappy about using the idea of Adam as a steward. That doesn't mean to say that the human being doesn't have to use the earth responsibly and care for the earth responsibly. But I think that name or that idea of stewardship has excluded the older and, in fact, original picture of Adam, which is not the person who manages the earth's resources, but the one who leads all creation in its praise of the Creator. And that's the role of Adam, the high priest. And if you work with that model, then you have the picture that any activity that leads to the extinction of a species or to destruction within the creation, that activity diminishes the praise that is due to the Creator. So I would like to emphasize the role of Adam as the high priest. And Adam, of course, is male and female. It means humanity, not just a male person. Humanity leading the praise of the creation, the creation's praise of the Creator. And stewardship follows from that. And I think this is very important because it is not, I would call a Protestant business model that actually can be held without any religious, what's the word I want, nuance at all. So I would opt for Adam, the high priest, every time, knowing that the responsible use of the resources is included within that, but high priesthood is not included within stewardship. Okay.
Excellent, and you might be saying that there's a difference between stewardship and consecration as well, because when you consecrate as a priest, you make something holy.
Oh, yes, you do.
Where a steward would more simply be interested in somehow managing and
Oh, yes.
much less of a religious or spiritual function.
Yes.
Some of you in this room will remember a talk given by Hugh Nibley about the difference between leadership and management.
Yeah.
You may not remember the talk, but you'll remember the his comment about the opening prayer, or all of that went. But I think that you're on to something very important. You often connect with Hugh Nibley's thinking, and
I'm not aware of this.
And I hear what you're saying here.
Which is interesting.
You'll learn.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between managing and manus, manipulating with the hand, and really leading.
Yes.
And what I like about what you're saying on leading is leading the worship.
Yeah.
And serving as a priest. David or Jacob, any comment on this?
It's great to be here with you, Margaret, and
Thank you, David.
to hear you speak on this topic. I always enjoy very much the content of what you have to share, and I'm happy that I get to talk a little bit about that and interact with some of the things that you've said here. But something that Jack said in his introduction really sparked my interest, and I hope maybe you could share a bit with us. You said, or Jack said, that speaking on this topic of the creation and the environment has given you the opportunity to interact in kind of some interfaith forums. I was wondering if maybe you could share with us who you've been able to interact with, what opportunities this has given you to be out there and to work on this.
Right. Well, this wasn't anything that was formally set up as an interfaith forum or something, but in 1997, a long time ago, I began an association which is still ongoing with a remarkable initiative on the part of the head of the Orthodox Church, His All Holiness Patriarch Bartholomew. And he has held, since then, many symposia, usually on a boat because he focuses on pollution of water. And he has invited to these symposia scholars and leaders from many faiths. And in that informal, largely informal setting, I have had the chance to exchange with Jewish thinkers, and obviously Jewish thinking is very like the Old Testament thinking that I do, and I'm very worried if we diverge too much, but also looking at how these traditions come through into the Quran. And that is the most of my interfaith has been with talking to Muslims and talking to Jews. And we have just so much in common. I mean, that theme that I mentioned of all creation praising the Creator, and that destruction diminishes the praise due to creation, to the Creator, that you can find that in the Quran as well. So that is the forum in which I have had the privilege of exchanging ideas and learning so much from people who share the same basic texts, sacred texts, as the Christians do. I've had less exchange with people from the Oriental religions, the Buddhists and the Hindus and so forth, although I was fascinated to listen to the presentations at Logan a few days ago. Absolutely amazing. We've got a lot of common ground, and there's a lot where we can work together. So thank you for asking me that question, David.
Jacob, you want to
Might as well.
raise a point?
Thanks, Margaret, for your thoughtful remarks. I followed a thread of yours from the temple tabernacle outer courtyard, representing earth, the material world, then the sanctuary proper as the heavenly or spiritual world. Followed that thread through your reference to the Lord's Prayer, that God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, and was wondering how you would see Jesus's invocation there. What sort of temple resonances you find there, and what you think what sort of significance that phrase you think might have in terms of temple theology?
I think the idea of thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, is actually well illustrated by the picture we have at the end of the book of Revelation, when the heavenly city appears and comes down to earth. What actually comes is a giant Holy of Holies, a giant golden cube. And I think this visionary image of bringing the values of the Holy of Holies, and if we were here for several days, we could expand on this, the value of the Holy of Holies, the place of unity and light and all these things, bringing these into reality in the material world. So it's a question of literally bringing the values of heaven to earth. And this is why we have so much, the kingdom of heaven is like at the beginning of the parables. And the kingdom of heaven is this ideal represented by the Holy of Holies, or that golden city in the shape of a cube. And it's trying to work it out in the business of everyday life. So it actually follows through the images very consistently. It's a beautiful picture. So thank you for asking that.